Unnatural Selection is the 7th episode of Season 2, and with it, Picard wants to discuss with Troy how things are working out. This show of mine, appearances notwithstanding, is not about nitpicking. It's about what comes to my mind as I'm experiencing the show. So while this may seem trivial, I was immediately thrown out by the blocking of Picard in this scene. Instead of asking Troy to take a seat and sit opposite her or sit next to her, he comes around, practically grabs her elbow to lead her to the couch, then begins pacing like he's expecting his first baby to be delivered. Appropriate to the title, it feels like Picard is acting unnaturally. And given what Will Wheaton said about Paul Lynch, the director who was obsessed with energy in every scene regardless of whether or not it called for it, I'm guessing he was looking for a way to avoid what is clearly a talky scene being, well, talky. They're talking about Pulaski and Picard's concerns about her as a medical officer, but it's going to have to wait because there's a distress signal. The USS Lantry, a supply ship, has a disturbing call for help, but they stop speaking even though the line is still open. After the titles, they try to get more out of them, but they can't. So it's decided we should go check this out. This episode was the lone writing TNG credit for Mike Gray and John Mason, who, and I may be wrong on this, but I believe came in as producers for the first half of Season 2 because the series needed to go in a new direction after the failures of Season 1, only for them to leave halfway through because of creative differences with Gene. When someone does a lone episode, there's often signs of it. So the peculiarities in this one show certainly indicate it. Data's way of indicating where the Lantry is, for instance, or the experiment we're going to get to soon, not to mention the solution. They speak of what is, on the one hand, ahead for how to write science fiction, except it doesn't quite gel with Star Trek. They decide to check out the Lantry, but aside from the fact there's no sign anyone's there, it seems fine. Not even any ships nearby, but they decide this time, rather than sending over an away team, hey, why don't we take control of their systems and switch on the bridge screen to see what we're dealing with first? Picard verifies that he is who he is, so the computer gives him the access codes, and they find out, a preview of the next presidential debate. They zoom in on the captain, who currently looks like a fusion of Abe Vigoda and Boris Karloff, and Pulaski confirms what it looks like. These people aged to death. In the ready room, they listen to the final log entries of the captain, talking about their inexplicable rapid aging, and Pulaski says that they were all in perfect health when they left. The only problem they had was a case of Therusian flu, which is a simple rhinovirus, so it shouldn't have caused this. But the only other place it could have come from, and I'm hesitant to even mention it, is Darwin Research Station, which, wait for it, is a genetic research facility. I can't help but thinking maybe we should have led with that one, not this, one of you here is the murderer. It could be Mr. Harris, Ms. Morris, Dr. Stabby von Throatslitter, or Mrs. Winters. I don't want to jump to any conclusions, but I must admit I have my suspicions.
But it wasn't me. I was alone sharpening my cleavers when it happened.
So they set up a quarantine for the Lantry, just in case there's a disease on board, and head to Darwin Research Station. The one who picks up says that there's a medical emergency. At first, she curtly wants to know who Pulaski is, but she's thrilled to learn that it's such an expert on virology, since they're dealing with something that's causing geriatric phenomena, she says.
The first symptom is sudden acute arthritic inflammation. Then the aging process accelerates.
We estimate that in a few hours we'll be unable to open a PDF.
Doctor, we understand that the Darwin Station is involved in genetic research. Is there a possible connection?
Our research here is limited to human genetics. I can assure you we're not dealing with something that got away from us.
If anything calls for a double take, it's no, we're not experimenting with viral genetic material. We're experimenting with human genetic material. After Picard announces that everyone aboard the Lantry, which they think is the one that infected them, are dead, she skips straight to asking about the science. She's worried about their children, she says, and by children, I mean their abominations. She's outraged that Pulaski would quarantine this place without taking the children first, who have been isolated and are showing no symptoms. apparently having never heard of Typhoid Mary.
Doctor, our options in a quarantine situation are extremely limited.
You're shooting them one? They head off to discuss this, with Pulaski of the opinion that one child should be beamed up in a force field, but Troy says that while Kingsley is telling the truth, it's not the whole truth. Given that, and the fact that we have 1,000+ people on board, we should probably err on the side of caution. Pulaski's like, okay, let's bring one child over in a bubble of plastic so I could check him out. And O'Brien sets it up so that the styrolite, it's called, will arrive slightly before the 12-year-old subject does, just in case.
A trick!
That's not a 12-year-old, that's Chris Hansen. Again.
A child this mature, we could be looking at the future of humanity.
Even if we wanted to argue that the augmentation ban wasn't technically declared in the show yet, this is... I'm not reversing my views on Bashir or Una, but human genetic manipulation is not a straight binary situation of yes-no. Not punish people for things they didn't do, but also don't set out to create an improved human race to replace us either. If anyone wanted to genetically engineer a collection of humans, that kind of shit should be common knowledge across the whole of the biological sciences, if not the whole of the Federation, period. Surely other races in the Federation might have concerns if one of the founding worlds decided to suddenly replace themselves with genetic super beings. Well, after looking the subject over, Pulaski says she wants to let him out of the styrolite, but Picard is concerned about taking him out of his original packaging.
But what if you're wrong? You saw what happened on the Lantry.
I know I'm right.
Oh, well, who am I to argue with your unfounded certitude?
But if we lose the force field for any reason, we lose the ship. Force fields can fail, and until...
We don't have that kind of time. He's a human being who needs our help.
But the risk is...
minimal.
Yeah, but you don't just consider the risks, you also consider the stakes. The odds of surviving Russian roulette are really pretty good, but the stakes are too high to actually justify it. Picard says that until it can be demonstrably proven that there is no risk, we're not doing it. So Pulaski tells Kingsley sorry, but we just can't take the chance.
Until we absolutely know the cause of the disease, the children...
The children are harmless. Every test on them has been negative. I demand that you do something to save them.
Oh no, things are getting worse. She's entered the Karen stage of her condition. Well, after talking to LaForge, Pulaski asks Picard to try in a completely isolated environment, a shuttlecraft. After being a bit of a pain, he finally agrees. They'll take the minivan shuttle, and Data will pilot since it's impossible for him to get sick. So the kid's beamed over, and she can let him out. After coming out, he speaks to her using telepathy. Oh, great. Just what this show needs, another Wunderkind. Well, soon...
needs work.
Bedside manner.
Ah, my funny bone. Yes, it seems the kid's contagious after all. And Pulaski has to call up to ask them to beam him back down to Darwin. The question now is, how do they rescue Data and Pulaski? The biofilters clearly aren't working, and we can't adjust to screen out what we don't know is causing it. O'Brien says they could use a previous transport to screen out whatever it is in her that shouldn't be there, except for the problem that she's never actually used their transport before. We're going to have to contact her previous ship and hope they might still have a copy of it around. Because they would be so interested in having something to remember her by. They arrive, and Kingsley is still skeptical they got the disease off one of the children, even though there's pretty much no other way it could have happened. She shows them moving shit around with their minds. These kids are that advanced.
Genetically engineered?
Not engineered, created.
The fuck kind of hair splitting is that? What'd you do if you didn't engineer them, Pygmalion? Did you perhaps carve them from wood and a fairy brought them to life? Anyway, she says her collection of golems can't get sick. Aggressive immunity is built in. The moment the virus tried, their immune systems would attack it.
Their immune system would release an active antibody that would attack the virus.
Even at a distance?
Their immune systems don't wait for a disease to attack the body. It would seek out an airborne virus and destroy it.
From a biological standpoint, that seems like a needless waste of energy and resources. Combine this with all the other crap that kids can do, they gotta consume like 10,000 calories a day. Data's going to analyze how their immune system and the virus would have interacted, but there's no real solution. Seems Pulaski's last ship deleted all her transport logs.
Not that she used the transporter much. She preferred the shuttlecraft. I would have given her a shuttle if it would have kept her here.
I'd have given her two if she'd stayed away. Seems she came to the Enterprise because she was an admirer of Picard's service, but that's all we've really got time for. Data solved the puzzle. After the antibodies that the golems created took care of the virus, they then altered the genes for aging in humans. Given their own rapid aging to adulthood, if there was going to be a side effect, that wouldn't be unreasonable. The fact that those humans can then keep spreading it afterwards is, but I'm not going to quibble at this point. I kind of just want this one over with. Pulaski declares that the Darwin Station's quarantine is now permanent. It would be lethal to allow the golems to ever leave. Data can go, though. The transporter can screen out any biological life form, so he can't carry anything on or in his system.
The subtle molecular transposition of...
Yes. But say if it were undone, would she be normal again?
As normal as ever, sir.
That bad, huh? Picard thinks they can use a sample of her DNA and a whole lot of tech to make up for not having a transport pattern. Data and Riker find a hair with a follicle on her hairbrush, so they can use that. But this is all still theoretical. What's more, O'Brien notes, this is one way. If it fails and she's infected, they can't just send her back to the planet. They'd have to essentially scatter her particles to the four winds, or else she'll infect the whole ship. So Picard takes that responsibility, and when she starts to come through, it is looking bad, but O'Brien thinks he can sort it from his station. And sure enough, she arrives fully restored. Pulaski gives a closing log about blah, blah, blah. Anyway, it's decided the Lantry is unsalvageable and it's blown up, with everyone standing out of respect. The end. The post-episode follow-up. Annoying character goes to Kingsley for causing this and being a pain in the ass. Final score for this episode is 3 out of 10. It's better in principle than it is in execution. The episode tries to do many things, to be reasonable in its approaches and demonstrate procedures. I like all that, but it's struggling uphill. For starters, the genetic manipulation of human beings like this is only about the problem that it creates as far as the episode goes, not about the implications of what it is that they're doing here. It's like they have this invention. We've created a device that will prevent anyone from ever breaking the law. And the only thing they want to talk about is that it gives people vertigo. Put this into the context of Trek, and it especially feels out of place, considering, that whole augments thing. Then add in other things like this use of the transporter, avoiding sending an away team to Lantry just this once, when it would have been fatal if they had, and it just feels like something else that someone turned into a Star Trek episode. I don't think that's what it is, I'm just saying how it feels. But that could all have been overlooked if the episode was engaging enough, but unfortunately it isn't. It plays a little footsie with character, but it just doesn't do enough to invest us. There's elements of the framework that I like, but the execution in both its implications and its final product leaves a lot to be desired.
All hail the Overlord! All hail the Overlord!
Not necessarily. Commander Data has a way with computers.